So thank you for joining us again. This is for our third of our new refreshed or new formatted podcasts. For those of you who've been before, you don't need to have this introduction, but those of you who haven't, I'm going to do it anyway. 3 topics, 30 minutes to keep us spinning through some of the stuff that's top of mind right now. I'm joined again with Alan. And so our first topic, as Alan's back again for his second visit on the podcast, is where in the world has Alan been? I know, Alan, you've been in part in Naples to celebrate their first Scudetto, I think, since 1990.
Yeah, you know, we missed it in the sense that they were supposed to win on the Sunday and they didn't. And so the whole place was decked out. And then they closed the championship like a couple of days after we left Naples. So we missed it.
You missed out on all of the fun and the games and the flares.
We missed all the crazies, but it was amazing visit. Yeah, because I was there in Italy for a family wedding and my sister-in-law's birthday. My wife's Italian, and but that was sort of snug in between work travel, so it sort of worked out pretty well.
You don't get to be an analyst and have a full holiday. You've got to go, well, I've got to fit this in between.
Yeah, it sort of was a bit like that, actually. Actually, it was a lot like that, because the first week I was in New Orleans for AIM, which was really good, actually. And I spoke a bunch of times there. I'm on the board of AIM, so there was board meetings as well. So it was busy. It was busy. Mm-hmm. And then as we got here, that photograph does not do justice to one of the most amazing head offices I've ever been in.
Awesome.
Papyrus Software in Vienna, where I was sort of giving a keynote and then a little workshop in the afternoon, and then from there, the following day, actually, I flew from Vienna to Austin to speak at Reworked a couple of times there before coming home. So it's sort of just 3.5 weeks, I think, just little over 3 weeks anyway on the road. Papyrus, though, was a bit of a revelation, if I'm being honest, and it, in the sense that, and it's really hard to say this because it just.
Can you give a little bit of background in Papyrus to people who don't know them? Because
that's a good point, actually, because they are a very well-known company, but more so in Europe. So if you're in insurance, for example, in Denmark, you'd know Papyrus Software because just about everybody uses it. They've been around for, I believe, 35 years, and I believe I might have got this wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is a company that's never really had outside funding, sort of family growth, very, Austrian, German, very solid, profitable, great company. I mean,
last time Dan and I were talking a little bit about differences between US and European companies, and I guess Papyrus would be a good example of that. Middle stand, sort of Central European, self-funded, probably still owned by the founders, kind of 20-year-old software company, steady growth per annum.
Max and Anne-Marie, so they're the owners, and it was just great because it was their sort of annual customer event, and I love doing customer events. I really do, because you just get to talk to so many people, and you just got sort of finger on the pulse, right? And it was just amazing because we were talking. I mean, obviously, things like GPT came up, and
of course,
and the law. And actually, to be fair, Papyrus is one of the few who've got a blockchain product related to documents, and well done them. So we were talking about all the sort of modern stuff, but you were looking at these case studies and you're talking to these people, and it's just that slap in the face when you think, yeah, it's really complex, isn't it? And the one I think I referenced the most was what was, and a perfect contrast, by the way, to the Rework conference, where very simple request to just automate something for the customer, right? Because customer service spends, or whoever they are, right? Whoever's taking these calls spends an inordinate amount of time answering these queries. Like, come on, can't we just automate this? And simple request, very logical, great business case. Well, but to answer those questions, for a bit of the answers here, a bit of the answers there, but you've got all these different systems, you've got integration points, you've got workflows, you've got business analysis, you've got process analysis. And it was just great to get into the weeds on some of those things. And then to contrast that, as I say, I left, it was a long day, that was Tuesday. Left Vienna at 5 a.m. Went to Frankfurt, went to Austin. Oh, I was so jet lagged. And then to be at Reworked and the AIM conference the previous week, where, you know, there's a lot of vendors there touting their wares, and good for them, right? Good stuff. But in the middle there, you've got the Papyrus event, right? Where it's just suddenly like, this is how hard this stuff actually is to do.
Yes.
And so it was really good. AIM was excellent. It really was. We had a closing keynote, which apparently was divisive, on sort of GPT.
Yes.
Because, you know, AIM, right? The Association of Intelligent Information Management, so intelligent, couldn't get past the AI discussion. It was going on everywhere, but it was the same sort of thing. It's like, yeah, we're all interested, and actually this is a very smart audience, so they actually know what they're talking about, and they know what this stuff is, and they know what it can do. And here's the thing, Matt, at Reworked, you could see it actually impacting the workplace.
Yes.
Right? Generating marketing content.
Well, in one case, I think it was a Rework. You said you're talking to someone who recently had been downsized, and which they believed is a direct result of the implications of using AI.
Do you know, I was really awkward. He sat next to me at lunch, and he just, and him and his entire team have been laid off. We won't say from where. It's an online recruitment firm anyway, right? Because his team used to monitor and rewrite and make sure job descriptions were legally compliant and did the job. What I don't know about job description, whatever they did, right? And they made them right. And the company said, we can get GPT to do that now.
Yeah.
So him and his lot got chopped. Now we have to factor in here disgruntled employee.
Of course, and with every right to be disgruntled. Let's be honest.
Had every right to be disgruntled. So, you know, I have to take this with a pinch of salt just to be realistic. But what he was actually saying to me was his biggest concern was, well, you know, two things. One, the job descriptions are now just generic. Well, you know, is that a problem? I don't know. Maybe generic job descriptions just fine. But his bigger problem was a lot of what they did was ensure job descriptions were compliant.
Yes.
With regulations and laws. And he said, and most job descriptions aren't. It's not intentional, but people just don't realize you can't say that, or you must do this, and apparently GPT doesn't know those things.
Well, that's the interesting nexus point, probably between AIM, which is probably, I would guess, very strong on governance and process, Rework, which is much more focused around work and the future of work. And the two nexus's point is understanding how we can do things better but still meet our compliance, our regulatory requirements, our legal requirements in all the places that we do business. So it's a very interesting contrast between those two events, I would imagine.
Totally. And I mean, it's just sort of scheduling magic or what coincidence or whatever, but you're absolutely right. The AIM conference, I mean, you can't get through a conversation without the word governance being used. Of course, because that's what it is, right?
Yes.
It worked. Somebody used the term fluffy, which I think is a little dismissive, but they're focused on the experience, right? And not how you get to that point, right? It's more, you know, we need to improve the employee experience. We need to improve the customer experience, the citizens, all good stuff. But those two worlds historically haven't really talked to one another.
And I guess another big contrast is that one event Reworked, you can imagine IceT being there as a presenter, which don't necessarily manage that. Think he would probably be as sort of fit in as well at AIM.
No, I didn't actually get to meet him, and I gather he's gutted.
Oh, well, there you go.
Can you do?
Well, maybe next year. And I think actually some of the stuff that you were talking about, particularly around the demands of governance around, and then AI coming to the desktop. And certainly while you were away, it's been a big theme for this year is generative AI, particularly in our world, in the world of kind of assistance is kind of everywhere. I'm just taking an example. I'm looking at sort of what's been happening in what's been coming through my desktop in the period, the last sort of month or so. We had back in March, Microsoft launching Copilot, so their collection, an ever-expanding collection of AI-derived helpers within the 365 family, although of course it's not limited to that because it's rolling out through Dynamics and the artist formerly known as SharePoint as well at the same time. And then more recently, they started to roll that out to some early customers, so it's kind of a paid experiment. But probably what was more interesting, and we've covered some more of this on in analyst notes and other things, is around their work trend index, which has some very interesting attitudinal stuff around what they believe from their data collection employees are thinking and feeling about AI, what business leaders are feeling about AI, and their impact in work. Not just generally AI, but actually how is it affecting the way in which you work and the way in which you're planning work. And then we had, I think this was in the space of 24 hours, 4 different GPT announcements from Salesforce around various parts of their clouds. They was to coincide with their New York kind of world tour stuff. So they like to have a lot of announcements related to that. But it was basically 4 in the space of a day, where we covered a little bit last time you and I spoke a month or so ago about how a lot of these vendors are starting with foundation models and saying, right, we're going to plug all the foundation models in, but the next step obviously is to allow you to bring your own model, so your own sort of custom large language models that are coming along. And then probably the people who've been bundling AI functionality into their suite for the longest time. I was on a summit call they had last night with Google, where they were saying, actually, well, we started to put in bits of AI into the what the area now known as Workspace back in sort of 2015, when you started to have suggested replies and that kind of stuff, and they had a whole map of all the various functions that they've had. They did a bigger set of announcements around a Google I/O this year, including Duet AI, which is very much that kind of sit next to you, all-knowing employee, colleague, helper who can sit next to you and prompt you with maybe what you want to write, maybe write some stuff for you, maybe suggest involving some people in the organization. So very much a helpful co-worker. And a lot of this prompted I to sit down and put something together, and let's prompt a little bit towards our own work. So actually today, which is today, not probably when you're watching this, but it'll be available for you to download and for free from the website for people who are fill in a little registration form and tell us who they are and what they're looking at, is our kind of primer. It's not designed really to be here's everything you need to know. It's meant to be, this is probably what you need to know now. Most of these tools are not in GA. They're probably not going to be in GA this year. And when they go to GA, they're probably going to go to selected customers first. And certainly in the case of Microsoft, the people who spend the most on 365 for the all-encompassing licenses are likely to be those people who get it first. So it's more thinking a little bit about what are some of the themes? Why are all these things coming along now? What are they going to give you? How can you start to think about building this into those kind of ideas? Thinking less magpie-like, which is what's shiny, and thinking more what's useful right now, and focusing that not just on leaders, so people running businesses, people who have got lines of business, but also towards employees and the workforce. Thinking about when these things come along, how do you embrace them? How are they things you should be working with? Are they welcome co-workers? Are they competing for your desks, competing for your desk, competing for your salary? Are they really invited guests in your workspace? You've been kind of viewing it a little bit different. You've not been sitting through all of the briefings I've been sitting on, so that's probably gives you a different perspective, let's say, to me, Alan. I wonder what you've been viewing this stuff.
It's a good report, and you're right. I mean, what I have been doing is playing with GPT since the release, right? And
absolutely,
and don't get me wrong, it's very, very impressive. And there obviously is a business case, and we just talked about people getting laid off, right? Mm-hmm. So there obviously is a business case, and my challenge at this point is for this as an added feature. Well, yeah, you know, I mean, if your company's running on Microsoft or Google, well, you're going to have it. I get that. Where I'm scratching my head is, but if you start charging extra for it, is anybody going to pay for it? It's cool, it's clever, but I'm just not. I'm at a loss as to how they're going to generate enough money to cover the costs, because it's a lot of money. I mean, these aren't cheap tools.
Well, no, and I think one of the things that we speculate, without giving away all of the contents of the paper, is to speculate why now and why in this volume. And I think we shouldn't separate out the sudden glut in GPT tools that are going to be available to you, that are being heavily trailed right now, and the fact that at the same time, organizations are looking to rationalize, potentially reduce the number of large IT partners and software providers that they have. So they're trying to look and say, we can't necessarily afford to keep all the tools we've got. So we're going to start to rationalize things a little bit more. What have we got that we're using? And certainly, this is something that came up in our work intelligence work earlier this year, is that actually one of the unintended initial consequences is having an idea, what are the tools inside your organizations that you use? So we've got a little bit of a mini arms race, I think, here. One, it's cool and it's exciting and it's good stuff and it demos well. It's really good to have in your keynote. I mean, this is stuff that's getting onto, you know, the sort of the 10 o'clock news on the BBC here. So it's got cut through to consumers and people at home. It demonstrates that the thing you've invested on is still cutting edge. So even though most of what you're using in 365 or in Workspace or in the various Salesforce clouds is more or less the stuff you've been using for years and are very familiar with, don't worry, new stuff is coming and it's going to make sure your competitive advantage is still there. And between them, it's making sure that nobody can really put their hand up and say, we're doing this and nobody else is. Everybody's doing it. So it's kind of almost a protecting your core revenue for those big suites.
Yeah, and I won't mention their name, but one of the bigger vendors, right, had a briefing and I was on it a few weeks back now. And I think this CTO hates me at this point, because they were basically telling me, oh, you're never going to believe this. We're announcing an integration with GPT and we're bringing AI to our product. And I was just completely, totally underwhelmed, right? For two reasons. One, everybody else is doing that anyway. So I could have guessed that was coming. That's not a big surprise. But the second thing was, and you touched on it earlier, is like, well, yeah, that's cool and all, but I'm not convinced that really massive large language models are as valuable as for the enterprise buyer as people think. I really don't. I think there's an emerging and there's a future market for smaller, more specific AI that meets very specific needs. And just at the moment, they're getting lost in the noise.
Well, I think large general models are good for large general problems.
Exactly.
So for argument's sake, something like Grammarly, which I know that you're a fan of, where you are dealing with something which covers all writing in English. That's where you need a very large set of information, but it's a very wide problem. If you're saying, hey, I work in a specific sector, well, straight away, you can throw away 99% of everything that's in the LMM because it's no longer relevant at this point. However, to then build that back up to the point where it's large is a significant investment. So, you know, it's not a surprise that you and I and everybody believes actually down the line, domain-specific LMMs are likely to be the ones which which meet that AI usefulness quotient more. However, they require significant investments, not just to stand them up, but to continue to go through all the governance of the information in there that's required. And you know, I know we're back in talking about governance again, like people at AIM, but you know, if you're doing something, let's say for medicine, a particular type of medicine, that's not static, that's constantly in a state of flux. And if you're using something diagnostically, you need to make sure that you're using the latest diagnostic information with the right citations, with the right document review process, of stuff that ECN people love and are very familiar with, for the reason that you need that.
Yeah, and then the other thing, just very quickly on that,
Sure.
with the sort of desktop stuff. Don't get me wrong, I think it's cool, and you're right. I do indeed use Grammarly, and I'm a big fan. It's great. However, we have Brenda, our editor, who's a wonderful
awesome.
editor. Yeah, the thing is, though, there's a perception that things like Grammarly remove the need for somebody like Brenda. They don't.
Yes, they do not.
They don't. And I think that's one of those things, right? You know, yeah, they're helpful, but how helpful? And that's where you get to that point. How much would I pay for it?
Yeah.
Right? If Grammarly was $200 a month, forget it.
No.
Right? It's
a good opportunity to do a shout out for Brenda, for whose work our writing is significantly better.
She translates what I write anyway into actually readable English. It's fantastic. Yeah.
And everybody that comes along to Deep Analysis and reads reports is a beneficiary of Brenda's excellence. So.
Of human editing.
Absolutely. Already, we're on to topic 3. So we're into the last 10 minutes of the podcast already. This one's a bit more arcanely technical than many of the things we've done before. And I'm not suggesting that if you're watching this or listening to this, depending on which of the many consumption methods you can have, that you need these things to be dumbed down or leveled off. But I want to make sure that they're accessible to everybody who's listening. So if you're already an expert in data management and know your data fabrics from your data meshes, that's fine. Just close your ears for a few seconds, because I want to kind of baseline it a little bit. And one of the reasons I want to talk about this is that when our work intelligence report, particularly around the mining intelligence stuff, so process mining and task mining, we wrote quite a lot about the biggest element within that, which is problematic, is data wrangling. So that so many of particularly the small startups say, actually, we don't want to touch any of your stinking legacy data. We're going to collect it new from scratch in a format we relied on, because that's a pragmatic way of doing it, and which is good for some environments, but not for everybody. If you've got existing data, and if you want to start plugging that into applications that you're working on, there's kind of 2 ways of doing it, and only 2. You can call them many different things, and there are many nuances in that. So if you're the data person going, but it's more difficult than that, Matt, I know, I'm just trying to keep this simple to start off with, which is, if you want to start to, collating data, pulling it together and analyzing it, you've got 2 choices. You can leave it where it is and pick it up when you want it, or you can pick it all up and move it to one place and analyze it there. And the idea around using a data mesh is the first one. You leave it where it is, you remember where it is, and then you go and get it when you need it. What that means from an end user point of view is the application knows where that database is. The application knows where that log is, where that collection of information is. It doesn't matter whether it's on public cloud, a private cloud, or on-prem, the mesh manages it. As a user, I just go and get that bit of data whenever I want it. The pick it up and move it is kind of like, we're going to go and pick it up and throw it in a lake. Again, don't at me. I'm just using it as an example, where you collect it in one kind of place. Now, the reason why this came up is that, and this is just some text from the earnings call of Appian. I sat on several interesting Appian calls earlier this year about some of the things they're doing around process mining. They bought a process mining tool a couple of years ago, Lana Labs. They're building into a new product, which is in beta right now, called Process HQ. All quite normal. They have an existing data fabric product, which allows you to go and connect to Oracle databases and Salesforce and ServiceNow, on all the places with traditional endpoints, if you like, where you can go and say, hey, go give me your data on an API, go give me your data on a web service, all those kind of things. But what they're saying is, we're going to use exactly the same process, our data fabric, to deal with the data we want for process mining, which is predominantly event logs. And I sat there thinking, well, event logs are quite flat. They're files. They're comma delimited at best. So the best you're going to get out of them is a CSV file. And typically, and maybe it's just because I've used old clunky applications in my career, most of it, or you could call that legacy, which of course is what most software is that they don't tend to have very neat API endpoints to go hit a transaction log or an event log. So this sounds to me maybe a little bit more complicated than Matt Calkins is saying on the earnings call.
So first of all, call out to Matt Calkins, because I tell you what, as CEOs go, he's pretty good in the sense that he does actually seem to tell the truth. And here we go, data fabric is a fancy term for a virtual database. But beyond that, I think this is the thing. When we use terms like data fabric, which is essentially an abstract concept, right? It's like, oh, we've got all this stuff everywhere, but don't worry, we can pull it all into one place and that will make sense. That's really hard. It's really hard. And I'm not saying that Appian can't do it, but it goes back to what we were saying about the AI. Is it worth doing? I mean, this is not simple stuff.
Well, I think honestly, the core of
the applications, no, they haven't. They've got 105. They've got
the core of what Appian says makes perfect sense, right? So this is I'm not dumping on the data fabric idea that they are very proud of. They believe they kind of own the term, and that's kind of where I'm not picking on them. Using as an example here is saying, here the example on screen where you've got, you know, part of a process, some of which is an SAP, some of which is an Oracle database, which are very database, very structured content. They're designed, you know, to have a database connector, and they're designed to query. Event logs are not designed to query, right? They're designed to collect a whole bunch of enormous transaction data, which may or may not be in a form that you want. And then they typically have to do some kind of ETL to get that into some kind of shape, possibly even just to make it into a nice manageable CSV before any process mining tool historically has anyone who wanted to touch it. And of course, one of the things that's big about data fabric is that, hey, we're going to take the ETL problem away. Sorry, that'd be, you know, the extract, transform, and load. So basically taking data and turning it into a nice shape so you can process it. Sorry, I use an acronym when I was explaining it, my bad. So I think that this world I got on screen, these were taken from an Appian explaining data fabric YouTube. So you know, that's the kind of best screenshots I could really get to examine it. What we have here makes sense. The endpoints they're suggesting, I think, may be a little bit different than what we would find for process mining.
And it does make sense, don't get me wrong. But here's my problem with it. The idea with the data fabric is we have this sort of all-seeing, all-knowing set of data that we can pull from. What we've actually got, though, in this example is a very specific process. Okay, but there's 1,000 other processes. And this example here, which again is perfectly valid, but you know, we've got SAP, we've got an Oracle database, we've got a bit of Microsoft and Salesforce. Again, in the real world, that's rare that something is that clean. And I'm struggling with this one because I actually like what Appian's proposing, but it's the same problem with a lot of AI. Right, it's like if all you want to do is read a document, well, that's okay. All you need is access to a document. If what you're trying to do is some sort of great mind figuring out what the enterprise is up to, suddenly you need access to tons of stuff, right? And then it doesn't become practical. You can't do it. So again, you've got this. So the concept is great, but going back to what I was saying about Papyrus, right? Even simple requests. Can we just automate this regular customer query? They ain't simple.
Yeah, and of course, ultimately the endpoint of this, and it kind of folds back into two. One is this is designed ultimately to be, you know, citizen developer friendly. So the idea that I don't need to I manage IT, I can go and do this analysis and pull this data. It's complicated. It's complex. It's complex enough where you've got friendly endpoints. When you're starting to pull event data from your process mining work, you know, that's significantly more complicated. And of course, at the same time, I should be shout out to Appian. They're one of the other people who are looking to bake as much AI help, particularly around sort of development. So, you know, an AI suggesting, hey, these are the things you do. These are the data points you should be including. These are the reports you could be building. So at the same time, they're expecting the AI is going to be there to help prompt build those things together. So, you know, there's a lot of complexity here, and I don't think we're going to be able to do it justice in our third of our kind of 10-minute slots here. But I think that's something that we're going to be returning to, and certainly when Process HQ we learn more about it, I think we want to learn a little bit more about Appian's approach there.
data fabrics and orchestration, those are the themes for the next couple of years, because that's currently the problem, right? You can automate something, but people are getting much more ambitious. They want to bring so much more control and automation to really complex situations, and without this concept of data fabric, without advanced orchestration, that's never going to happen. So these are big topics.
They are. Big topics. That's our lot. That's our 30 minutes. That was our 3 topics in 30 minutes. Thank you for joining us for 1, 2, or all of those 3. We'll definitely have 3 more interesting, exciting topics for you for next month. So thank you for joining us.